All right, another week and another book of the Bible. We are on Second Samuel. So this story picks up right with First Samuel. We talked in the last episode, First and Second Samuel, not originally separate. They would be one product, one scroll. We split it up in our Bibles, call them First and Second Samuels. I think people actually say it's supposed to be 1 and 2 Samuels. I don't know, not the expert. But you could think of it as just the book or scrolls of Samuel. One work. And actually, in my book, Second Samuel doesn't even have its own intro. It just has a little reference saying, hey, go back to First Samuel. So they kind of acknowledge, like, hey, this is one work. That's the same with First and Second Kings and First and Second Chronicles. So just jumping ahead, those will also be one work originally. So if you can think of First Samuel as the time that Saul is king, with a bit in the beginning where leading up to it, then Second Samuel is about the time that David is king. And I'm pretty sure that carries all the way to the end. Let's go double check. Because I believe David's altar, and then David is dying in First King. Let's take a check. Pretty good memory at this. David's last days. Yep. So you can think of Second Samuel as like the records of David as a king. He spent all of First Samuel running away, hiding from Saul. A lot of good stuff about David's integrity, his character. He shines really bright in First Samuel. Second Samuel, he still starts off really well. He mourns for the death of Saul. You have him killing the messenger who claimed to have killed Saul. It's ambiguous as to whether he did or was trying to earn some credit. I know that as modern readers, we read that and we're like, whoa, all right, that's intense. But the guy did claim to have killed the king, so David decides he needs to go. And then David becomes king, not first of Israel. He first becomes king of Judah. And then they have to kind of work to get the rest of the tribes kind of put together. So it's sort of a civil war. So it's a little bit crazy, but by chapter 5, we get David as being king back over all of Israel. So first he gets Judah, and then he gets all of Israel. You can kind of view that as like a first and second coming sort of foreshadowing. I don't know if that was what is intended, but that's kind of like what comes to mind when I'm kind of going through that. So now David is king, and he does a pretty good job at the start. He starts off with moving the ark to Jerusalem, and he wants to make a permanent house for the ark. Initially, he's told by Nathan, he's like, yeah, go ahead. And then God actually speaks to Nathan, and Nathan's like, okay, you can move the ark to Jerusalem. You can write up all these plans. You can collect all the materials. But you are a man of war. You have blood on your hand. God never asked for it, and he doesn't need you to build him a house. He's going to use your son to build him a house. But since you offered, hey, David, I'm going to make you a house. And this is actually building on the promise that we've been looking for in this whole story. Who is the seed of Eve who's going to crush the devil? And so now we get, David seems like a great character. Now we get this promise of God. Hey, I'm going to create a house for you, a dynasty that's never going to end. There's going to be a ruler that's in charge. And now you're like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. David's going to have an everlasting dynasty. So it seems really good. So he makes that covenant with David. David does a great job. He has lots of victories. So he does really, really good up until chapter 11. And that's when it all starts to fall apart. You actually kind of get a little hint before the issues with Bathsheba starts. Let's see here. So it starts off chapter 11. In the spring, when the kings march out to war. So right there, okay. What are the kings supposed to do? The kings are marching out. David sent Joab with his officers and all of Israel, and they destroyed and they besieged, but David remained in Jerusalem. So especially if you know the Bible, but even beforehand, you go, wait, thought the kings marched out for war. Why is David still in Jerusalem? So already you got this like suspicion in your head, like, what's he doing? And I find this very true in my life. When I am at work, when I am doing things, when I am busy, I am at my best. Temptation's a lot easier just to wave off. If I am at home, being lazy, on a break, no accountability, just by myself, I am just not as productive. My default is lazy. So I love being in the habit of I got work, I've got tasks, we are parenting, got all these things. You put me on a spring break with no plan, I just become a lazy sloth. So I understand David, and he needs to put himself where he should be, which is with his men. And I'm the same way. I feel like I got to be doing my things so that way I'm in productive mode and not in procrastination mode. So this is just a train wreck. It goes from bad to worse to worse to worse. So David up on the balcony, he sees Bathsheba bathing. He's like, wow. And he sleeps with her, gets her pregnant. He first tries to hide it by having her husband, Uriah. He's not even an Israelite. He's a Hittite. Tries to have him come back home from war. He's like, hey, you've been doing great. Why don't you go home? And kind of hoping that he sleeps with his wife. So that way he would kind of like, people would think that he got his wife pregnant. Unfortunately, unfortunately for David, but Uriah is like, no, my fellow men are out at war. I'm not going to go home and enjoy the luxuries of my home, my bed, my wife, and he sleeps at the gates. So that plan doesn't work. So David can't get him to sleep with his wife. So instead he makes a plan to have him killed in action. And even Joab, who is going to follow the king's rule, he's like, this was a bad idea. So it goes from bad to worse, trying to cover it up, murder to cover it up. It's all just a train wreck. And that leads to him being called out, the death of their son. And sort of that's David's big fall. So he is going downhill at this point. There's still some good in David's story, but you never get the sense of like David in his peak. Now we do get out of this marriage because then he ends up marrying Bathsheba. We do get Solomon. So that is the next son that he has with Bathsheba. So you kind of just, it's a short little paragraph. And they had Solomon. And then they moved on. And actually, I picked this up while reading it. Solomon has another name. It's actually Jedediah. So he sent a message through the prophet Nathan, who named him Jedediah. Let's see here. My Bible has what that means. Jedediah means beloved of the Lord. So there you go. All right. So the rest of Samuel there's still more tragedy. You get issues within David's family that, again, is over some really horrible things. Banishment of the son. David still loves the son, but he's banished. He comes back, and that son now takes over. David has to flee again. They finally kill his son, and David just wants to be sad about it, and which upsets his men. And then finally David comes back and has to kind of put everything back in order. It's kind of a whole big mess. There's a few good things that David does in there, like honors his promise to Jonathan and helps out one of Jonathan's sons. And then my favorite part, so starting in 23, you get David's last words, and then it kind of just cuts randomly to a bunch of these warriors that were with David. And I've always loved that. It's just like David's got his bros. And you've got all these stories of like, and there were these three like supreme, and then you got the person who was over the three, and you've got this group that were awesome. And I remember reading that growing up. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be awesome. I want to have people that are around me that are awesome. So I really enjoyed that. And then at the end, we get this little story. So David David takes a military census, and he's even warned by Joab. He's like, hey, don't do this. What are you doing this for? You don't need that. He does it anyways. And then the Lord, he says, hey, that's not okay. Because it's essentially David saying like, hey, I want to see what's in my power and not relying on God. So God gives him a choice. Hey, you're going to be punished. Which punishment do you want? And he chooses a plague. And then the plague is killing a bunch of Israelites, and it ends up stopping in Jerusalem. It's a very interesting, it's like the angel of, here it is. It's like the angel of death or the plague. I have great anxiety. So the Lord sent a plague on Israel from that morning until the appointed time. And from Dan to Beersheba, 70,000 men died. Then the angel extended his hand toward Jerusalem to destroy it. But the Lord relented concerning the destruction and said to the angel who was destroying the people, enough, withdraw your hand now. The angel of the Lord was then at the threshing floor of Uraunah, the Jebusite. So he's at this threshing floor. David's going to go and sacrifice to it. It's really cool. I think you actually pick up more of the story in the Chronicles, probably 2nd Chronicles, and could be wrong on that, but it's in the Chronicles. There's more to this story. David goes, and the guy's like, hey, whatever, just this can be your land. Go ahead and use it. Make your sacrifice. And David's like, no, I insist on paying for and buying the land and your stuff. So David actually purchases this land. And the last time I studied this, which was a while ago, so could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is the future home of the temple. So David buys this land to do this sacrifice, and then this becomes the place for the temple later on. So pretty cool. Okay, and then we finish off 2 Samuel, and then we move into Kings next, but that will be covered in the next episode. Hope you guys are enjoying this. Would love to hear from you in the comments. I am back doing pretty well on read my readings and recording my episodes, so happy to be. I will talk to you guys in the next episode. Bye.